Good afternoon and welcome to the nonfiction meeting. I'm very glad to have you here. My name is Shawn Inmon. You may never have heard of the two people to my left, so I'll let them introduce themselves.
You
I think,
go first.
Do we have to get it close? Is it okay this far away? Is it good? Okay, there you go. Just talk like a normal human.
I'm Joanna Penn, and I write non-fiction for authors under Joanna Penn. And as JF Penn, I just did my first pilgrimage memoir, and I guess my latest, Writing the Shadow, is kind of half memoir, but I definitely have a lot more plans for this different kind of thing. I've mentioned in other sessions, next year I will have a Gothic cathedral book coming out under JF Penn. That will be huge. So I guess for me, I do different kinds of nonfiction, but yeah, certainly travel memoir is important to me.
And my name's Craig Martelle, and I write nonfiction, author self-help books. That's almost like a memoir, because I look at my books as conversations with fellow authors. I also have a travel series called A Couple's Travels. We have currently 6 books out, 2 or 3 more in the pipeline. Those are mostly picture books, which is a good thing. And it's also the sole purpose of that is writing off our trips. I have a memoir that's in the works that I'll publish. It's humorous stories from my time in the Marine Corps and my life. And I'll publish that sometime. I'll publish that under Craig Martelle. I published A Couple's Travels under Craig Martelle. And my Successful Indie Author series, I published that under Craig Martelle. Same thing. Same thing as my thrillers and my science fiction. I published that under Craig Martelle too. I didn't have enough energy to do more than one name, even though it's kind of scattered and might be a little better with C.H. Martelle, but no, it's all me.
So my first book came out in 2012, and it was a memoir, and I thought it was the only book I would ever write. And now I have 40 books out. Just shows you what happens when you start opening your creative mind a little bit. So I wrote 2 memoirs, and then I wrote 2 travel memoirs. Why? Because I wanted to be able to write off my trips on my taxes. And it ended up that the memoirs sold well enough that they paid for the trips and then a little bit more. So that's another consideration to get into. So as somebody pointed out, this is our only nonfiction meeting here at the conference. So here shortly, I'm going to just throw it open to the floor. We don't have a microphone, so you're just going to have to shout it out. Really shout it out to me. I was a former rock and roll DJ. I'm half deaf in this ear, and I don't hear very well out of this ear, but I'll try to repeat your questions so Joe and Craig can answer them for you. But we'll throw it open shortly, but I thought I'd start us off. What are some of the advantages of writing a memoir of any type, either a travel memoir or just a personal memoir?
Well, I think that... so who's writing memoir in the room? Okay. The rest of you will. Because I think that's the point. I don't think there's any business advantage to writing a memoir. My pilgrimage memoir, it took years, and this Writing the Shadow, 20 years of writings. One of my drafts of pilgrimage was over 100,000 words, and some people might call that wasted words. Like if you were doing that for fiction, you could have published a ton of books. But I think we do memoir because it's the meaning. There's something that drives us, that calls us to write a memoir. And I think I tiptoed up to it and then tiptoed away from it for many years. And then COVID, menopause, needing to go for really long walks to deal with life, and things all came together. And so I really think that the advantage of writing a memoir is your own personal creative journey. And to my surprise, they do sell, as you mentioned, and my Kickstarter for Pilgrimage far, far exceeded what I expected. And but it's also the most terrifying thing. So I really think the advantage is creative. I feel my writing has completely changed. My Writing the Shadow, which I just did put on Kickstarter, again, is even more vulnerable, even more honest. Writing that memoir has changed my life again. So I wish that for all of you. And it's the hardest thing I've possibly ever written. And I can see that there will be more memoirs at some point. But yeah, if you're still holding back, then the advantage is you will change.
I tell you what, the memoir I'm working on is, it reminds me of how funny my life was and how much fun I had growing up, and especially in the Marine Corps. And also it's a legacy for my son and my grandchildren. Your memoir is your life story told through your eyes. So it's going to be warped, and it's going to be fun, and it's going to have some hard truths, and it's going to have some good truths, and it's whatever you want it. Do you want to leave people with, what kind of impression do you want to leave people with? Because once you're gone, that's what there is. The biggest selling books on Amazon, when you see the top selling books of the year, they're all memoirs. But they're memoirs from people who are ridiculously well-known and successful, like Michelle Obama. Oh, no kidding, she sold 8 million books. Surprise. No, that warps it. You're thinking that, memoirs sell. No, memoirs of celebrities sell. Unless you're a celebrity, it's different. And the Kickstarter is a great way to go because that gives you perspective and how exotic do you want to get with your book. We all have a lot of pictures thanks to the little device in your pocket. You can pepper your book with pictures. And like my couples travels books, they are picture books basically. The one I'm currently editing on Scotland, I think has 219 pictures in it, all full color, and we do an offset print of those. We have a couple hundred copies printed is all. And so those are really, really nice looking books. So if somebody's looking at taking a tour of Scotland, hey, here's a book. So we're doing it that way. It's opportunity. The travel books are to write off your travel. The memoir is to pass on a bit of you, and the fiction is where you're making money.
I'll try to come back on a couple of things. So first of all is the tax-deductible travel. I write, my thrillers are set around the world, and I've always done tax-deductible travel for my thrillers. So I don't think that matters so much. You can certainly do it with whatever book, as long as you're making money. On the product, exactly right. So my pilgrimage memoir, which I did the Kickstarter for, I now sell the hardback edition, Book Vault. You can see it there. You might have seen the hardback edition. It has photos in. So that costs me £7, and I sell it for 20 plus shipping from my Shopify store. And again, about ads, again, a memoir might not be the biggest earner for all of us, but hardly anyone is advertising on memoirs. So you can actually get some of the cheapest pay-per-click ads possible. So that's a good thing too, as well. I just wanted to kind of add to that.
That's actually one of the questions I'm going to talk about here is how do you, and if you do, how do you promote your memoirs and travel books? Are you doing it through cost per click ads or social media, or or are you just letting it pay its own way, basically?
In my travel books, I do not advertise them yet. I'll have them. I have them on my website. But Joe said she looked and couldn't find it. So obviously,
well, you have so many.
I have 24 different series, so it can get buried. And on a Shopify store, I'll put it there because we do have all these hard copies in the garage that we need to move out of the garage, and hopefully somebody pays us for that pleasure. But that's advertising right now is not right now. I spend a couple thousand hours a year working on the conference, and come next week, I will recover all of that time. It's 2,000 hours is a full-time job. So now I have a new full-time job, which is now getting rid of these books in my garage. So I'll be opening a Shopify store and pushing those and getting those nice color books on the Black Hills, on Egypt. The good news was we were the first ones into Egypt after the pandemic. So almost all of the pictures, there are no people. It is better than most books you see on Egypt, because the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, there were no people in there. The pictures looked like it was closed for us.
A lot of dead people.
No living people. Yeah. What about you, Shawn? You write travel books?
I do. I've got my 2 travel books out. I've never marketed them. I market them through my social media, but I've never done a single Facebook or Amazon ad for them. I've sold about 10,000 copies of both of them. I sold about 30,000 copies of my memoirs, and I never did ads for them either. But
You were like rock and roll bloomin' DJ though. Come on.
yeah, well, I wasn't one of those famous DJs. I was one of those DJs.
Rock and roll DJ memoir, yes.
But to be fair, I launched those books in 2012, which it was a little easier in 2012. I put my first memoir out. I sent a little note to all these websites saying my book's going to be free for 3 days. They didn't charge me. They just said, thank you very much. We'll feature it. And the next thing I knew, I gave away 30,000 copies of that book in 48 hours. And in those days, of course, the pop list worked a little differently. They gave you credit for every book you gave away, about 1/10 of a book sold. So since I gave away 30,000 books, they gave me credit for selling 3,000 books in just a couple of days, which moved my book to the top of the pop chart, which meant and all of that is gone. I'm sorry.
Yeah, can I give the other side of that then? Because what is not gone and has been evergreen for 20 years is content marketing. And I base my business on content marketing. That's how I have a business. And that works really well for travel. So I have my other site, booksandtravel.page. I have my Books and Travel podcast, which I'm resurrecting next year, for those of you who have listened. And in order to start the pre-marketing for the Gothic Cathedral book. And I also, if you listen to the Creative Penn podcast this week, I put out a Pinterest episode. So Pinterest is coming back. As some of the social media sites are dying, Pinterest as a visual search engine is, so a few nods in the audience, so people using Pinterest. I'm super excited about using Pinterest to market my travel memoir, to get traffic to the site. So it's like what's old is new again with Shopify. The integration between Pinterest and Shopify is really, really good. So I'm like, okay, shoppable pins for travel memoir, I think is a really good thing. So don't think it has to be all the stuff that works for like high volume fiction, I feel is kind of completely different for emotional travel memoir. It's like so that's how I feel.
Do you do anything on Instagram with your travel book?
I do, but yeah,
I
do, but I feel like Instagram is social media and it disappears, whereas Pinterest is a search engine for visuals, and I have thousands of pictures as well, so you can click through the shoppable pin idea. But have a listen to that episode. It came out this Monday because specifically I want to focus on that into Shopify. So my whole thing now is how do we get sustainable traffic to our books on Shopify or whatever you're doing direct sales, in order to for me overtake my Amazon income. That's my plan. So I'm at 50% now, and I plan to be a lot bigger next year.
What I see on Pinterest is how to knit clothes from your cat's own hair.
That's big too. Have you got a memoir on that coming?
So I have a little piece of advice for those of you who are thinking of writing memoirs, and one would be to pick a thread of your life and write that thread really well. My first memoir, I didn't write it till I was in my mid-50s, and that memoir just covered one thing, which was my relationship with my wife. It was a romance memoir because I met her when we were teenagers. We lost each other for 30 years. We found each other 30 years later, got married, and we're living our little happily ever after now. So instead of writing about being a fisherman in Alaska and a DJ on the radio and running on the unlimited hydroplane tour and all these other things I've done in my life, I just focused narrowly on that. So I think a narrow focus can be better. And the other little thing is to be as vulnerable as possible. We had some really painful things in our life. And you know what? I just put it all out there and let people judge me if they want to. But as Joanna said, with content marketing, that gives me a lot of content marketing, because I market primarily on my Facebook page, and that helped people feel like they know me. So when I moved into fiction, now everybody feels like they know me because they read that book. They saw me suffer through all those things. So that's one of my pieces of advice. I was going to ask you guys what you think is a good advice for people that are thinking on writing any kind of a nonfiction, travel, personal memoir kind of book.
Shawn, did you compliment your book with tissues, maybe? Is that how it sold? Or?
I got a lot of comments that said it was so dusty in the room when I was reading this.
Aw. I think one of my tips is this idea of the transformational arc. You still have to have a character arc. The memoir needs to go from here to here, or some kind of transformation. It's not an autobiography or a biography of this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. No, it's I was here and this is how I was transformed. So for Pilgrimage, I do open with basically wanting to kill myself, and then end with, after going for some really long walks, going home and sort of not wanting to do that. Yay, hence I'm here. But that is, you talked about vulnerability. It's so hard to do this. It's super hard, but essentially if you want to help people, and I think I've had more feedback around the memoir and comments of people saying it really helped me, and that it also makes you want to be more vulnerable, because you can therefore help people going through the same thing. So yeah, I think that when you're writing it, consider that transformational arc. The other one I would say is editing is so important. I mean, we're all used to editing our books for sure, but your self-editing for a memoir, it's very hard to separate yourself from it. But boy, is it repetitive. I bet you'll find you're like, oh, all these things happen, and then you write it, you're like, oh, the same thing happened over and over again. So you have to get rid of a lot of the stuff that is repetition for the reader, in the same way you would if it was a novel or if it was anything else. So make sure you have that separation in your editing period, I think.
I think the most important advice here was a character arc. You write it like a story, and it's your story. Shawn and Joe were talking about vulnerability. Okay, I was in the Marine Corps. I'm not doing that crap. If I want to sell people my other books and show them, here's the things that happened behind the scenes that made me the writer that I am of military science fiction, of space opera, of my thrillers with my Marine as the main character, then that's where this stuff came from. And that's going to be that memoir. And actually, while we're sitting here, it's like, oh, geez, I forgot I have my other one. I Can See the Night, which is a memoir of my life in Alaska. And that's some of my near-death experiences. I've come close to dying far more times in Alaska than anywhere else, but also I've gotten older while I lived there. And I do have that stuff in there. And that's sitting there. I've got it. I've got some great pictures that my wife took of the Northern Lights from our driveway, because that's where we live, and it's just what we have. And that will be a book that I publish closer to the end of my life. It's not one that I'm going to publish right away in order to not garner sympathy, but be vulnerable, because it is a vulnerability of the recognition of growing weaker, of not being able to do what you used to do. I was in the Marine Corps. I spent a whole career in the Marine Corps. Marines, right? Tough. And here I am. I can't push a snowblower. My wife has to carry the water bottles, because we get water in the 5-gallon jugs. My wife has to carry those because I've had too many asthma attacks carrying a single jug of water, for Christ's sake. And that's a change. And those kinds of issues as a memoir, it's not something I want to sell or say, hey, I've sold 50,000 copies of how weak I am. So yes, I have that as well, but I'll publish my Marine one sooner rather than later, because it's fun. And the character arc of me, and some pictures, but these are more just a soliloquy, a conversation, but a fun conversation between friends. If you've read my Become Successful Indie Author, that's exactly how I do it. Just a conversation. Here's how I'm doing. Here's what we can do.
And editing is so critical. When I wrote my first memoir, it was my first book as well. And my first draft of it was 140,000 words, all about me. And when I published it, it was 72,000 words. And why did I get good reviews, and why did I sell it? Because I published it at 72,000 instead of at 140,000, because I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Bob Seger, but he has a song that includes the line, you got to know what to leave in and what to leave out. And that, to me, is the most critical aspect of a memoir, which brings me to the point, sometimes in a memoir, you can have an antagonist, just like you do in, or somebody who maybe is not presented in the most flattering light. So the trick is, how do you handle that? Or have you guys run into that in yours? I know I did. So how do you guys handle it?
This latest book, Writing the Shadow, is called, the subtitle is Turn Your Darkness into Words. I know some of you are backers here, thank you. But that, obviously, it's about a lot of dark things, and it is a writing craft book, but it's also half a memoir. And we all have family issues. And some of the stuff, I wrote it. And this is, I wanted to also mention truth with a capital T and truth with a small t. You want to communicate truth with a big T, as in the bigger things of life, but you don't always have to tell the truth with a little t, as in this is exactly what happened. Because memoir, I think, is about the bigger truth. And when I looked at I think Writing the Shadow gives you what you need in order to find meaning in the book. But I'll tell you guys, I cut stuff out because some people are alive and I love them, and it doesn't serve the book, it doesn't serve me, it doesn't serve them, so it's not there. And I think, I am healed and over those things, so I'm not doing it for therapy, I don't need to hurt them. And so I just felt like there's just no need. So I personally, at this point in my life, cut those things out. I have a memoir in me about being child-free. I'm very happily child-free. But there's a lot of politics. Yeah, there's a lot of politics with that. But that book I won't write until after my mum and my mother-in-law are dead. So yeah, let's say 40 years time. So for me, it's important. But I do know people who want to write in anger or want to write to punish, and I personally think that will probably damage you more. Yeah. I don't know.
I think
There's somebody in your life that's just a real pain in the ass.
Don't write a memoir.
make them a character in a fiction
In a
book
fiction
Questions
book.
in just a second.
and do them ugly. No, you guys answered the question. I don't have any
right.
additional input.
So I know, what are we down to? We got how much time?
21
we're halfway
minutes.
there. I
Here we
thought
go.
maybe we'd throw it open and start taking questions. Oh, thank you. So this lady right here in the pink.
It's probably a naive question, but if you're publishing a memoir with a lot of photos, what are the mechanics of that? Presumably you can only do it in print, and how, if you're getting them printed by BookVault,
I'll go ahead
how
and
do you
repeat.
get them to Amazon?
So I think the question is, if you're publishing a memoir or a travel memoir or nonfiction that's got a lot of photos in it, what are kind of the mechanics of that?
For us, we do an offset print, and that's the main book. I do publish on Amazon Kindle. If they're reading on a phone or a computer, they'll get the pictures in color. If they're reading on a Kindle Paperwhite, they'll get the pictures in black and white, and that loses some of the flavor of the books. So we recommend a certain way. But the offset print is the way to go for us. But our volume is so low. It's not 30,000, it's 200 copies, of which I think we still have 190 in the boxes.
Yeah.
So, because we haven't marketed it. I haven't even, I think I post once the second we have the paperback in hand, and that's it. So my answers would probably be a lot different a year from now.
Yeah, and I would say have multiple editions. So you obviously have my hardback pilgrimage with the colour photos. It's a more premium product, and that is still print on demand. So you can do print on demand, hardback, wraparound covers, full colour photos now. That's with BookVault. I know Ingram also do some. But then the paperback, which you can buy on Amazon, POD, no photos. Ebook, no photos. Audiobook, obviously no photos. So I would say that you don't need to have photos in a memoir. You need to have options for people to buy different priced products. But say you do the audiobook, you can say to people, you can check out the photos at my website. So my pilgrimage book has lots of callbacks to my booksandtravel.page website, where I have, full details of even the accommodation and where to stay if you walk the Camino to Santiago, for example, and stuff like that. So and then they come to your website, and then you pixel them and you newsletter them. So that would be the other thing. Always bring people back to your site. And on the audiobook, you can say you can download a photo pack or have a look at the photos back at my site. So hopefully that helps.
And by the way, I have done audiobooks on both my travel books and my memoirs, and they've done pretty well. I would have missed out on a nice income stream if I hadn't put them. But like I did a book called A Lap Around Alaska, and it had 100 full color photos in it. And I had to do the same thing in the audiobook, put a spot on my website where people could go look at the photos.
And Shawn never stopped at my
Craig
house.
has never stopped reminding me since I...
Just on the audiobook, I would really recommend you upskill and you read it yourself, because it's your memoir. And people really love to hear your voice. So I read mine. I'll read all my memoirs. I just think it makes a difference. I mean, if you really hate it and you really don't want to upskill, but I just think that actually makes a difference. I don't know whether you will do that.
Because it's so personal.
Upsell is a cool term.
Yeah.
It's a business term, and
Oh, I did say upskill.
upskill.
Upskill, as in you learn more about how to narrate books.
I think it's her accent. She means upsell.
Maybe both.
But it's both. It's about and that's the difference between a 3 and 4 figure author and a 5-figure author, is the ability to manage the business of what you do. I mean, my travel books are all picture books, so a audiobook is out of the question. But the memoir, of course, and that was my plan, is absolutely read it myself, because that's me. And I did record a bit for an audiobook here. My narrator, I included my author notes, and I recorded those. My narrator actually recorded those with me. So we're both there, and that is upskill. Actually, the first time I've ever heard that word.
Really?
But I
Ever.
like it. I'm
You
gonna
guys
use it
know,
from
is that
now
not
on.
an American
I'm
thing?
60. I'm 61 years old. I knew it. I learned a new word from Joe Penn.
Upskill.
Question here.
So my question's a bit long, but like I've been living overseas for the past 12 years and have been in multiple countries, and like I do a lot of different things like house sitting and traveling the world, taking care of people's houses and pets. But so I'm thinking of, you talked about choosing a thread, but I've got so many threads, like being location independent, working online. So do you recommend even building the brand around the lifestyle, but then have a series or something, or writing?
Yes. I think there's a difference between travel non-fiction and travel memoir. So it sounds there you're writing travel non-fiction as opposed to memoir. You said build a website and a brand around it and a series.
The brand because I have even my fiction will be based on the brand of my lifestyle. So.
Right. I personally think that, again, come back to that transformational arc. I don't know how many transformational arcs there are in that. A lot. Okay, well, if there are, then I would break it down that way and I would try and organise it, because, yes, having multiple books, as we all know, is always a good idea. But I think I've found, and maybe you can answer this, is that my memoirs won't be connecting to each other. You might want to read them because they're me, but I don't think I will have I'm not going to write another pilgrimage memoir as far as I know.
I have a writer friend whose name is Tony James Slater. If you ever want to look him up on Amazon, he writes hilarious travel
ridiculous
books.
travel books.
His books are called That Bear Ate My Pants and things like that. And he's had a really successful run of writing humorous travel, and that's his thread. And he covers a different trip in each book, basically. His name is Tony James Slater.
Out of Australia.
Yeah, he's out of Australia.
See,
Clear in the back, I see a hand.
That me?
That's you.
Yeah. So hi. Question about confidentiality for other people
Yep.
who appear in your memoir. So
Yep.
my memoirs are specific because I write about medicine.
Yeah.
And so that's a whole other ball game. But what about the other characters in your memoir, the people in your life? Do you change names, identifying features, etc.? Do you ask if they can feature in your book? How do you do that?
I think I have a much higher tolerance for risk than most people do. I named names. I didn't ask
If you were a
them.
medical doctor.
But if I was a medical doctor, I would have so I would definitely, Ms. X or change names and things like that. But just in my personal memoir, I didn't change anybody's names, and people like that. I'm in a book. So
As a lawyer, I would recommend getting a release for everybody's
There you
name
go.
you use, or change the name to protect the innocent. Even if it's identifiable, it's still change the name. Maybe give them a little quirk,
Yeah.
like old One-Eyed Bill, even though he had 2 eyes. It's like, oh, but you've got 2 eyes. This isn't you.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the truth versus truth with a capital.
Yeah.
You're still going to tell your medical memoir,
Yeah.
whatever it is. It doesn't need to be Tony Smith from Milwaukee or whatever.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter. I think that would be.
Exactly,
But yeah,
exactly the point.
We are not your lawyer.
I am, yeah. But I am definitely risk averse when it
Yeah,
comes to that stuff.
Me too.
Yeah, right here.
I have a kind of a craft question. My
Sure.
early teachers trained me to, they called it author intrusion.
Yeah.
So you don't do that, but then now that, and then I've written self-help, which is all author intrusion.
Yeah.
So now that I'm working on a memoir, I'm trying to find that balance. So you guys have any tips?
It's all right. We call it authenticity now.
I like it.
So I think that is I don't even know, never heard that term. That is an awful term. Author intrusion.
Well, I think it can be. I think it's viable in fiction.
Or journalism.
When you're injecting yourself without finding a clever way to say it, and you're just saying it, that's author intrusion. But in a memoir, like a self-help book, it's all author intrusion. I write everything in the third person past tense, but my memoir I write in the first person because
It's you.
because it's me. I'm the main character.
Yeah.
So.
And you guys know, I'm AI positive, but in terms of the way the world is, we need to get more and more personal, because if someone just wants something with no person in it, they can just generate it, and that will happen. But they cannot generate what we do individually. So that's why double down on being human, intrude as authors into
Be
your writing.
authentically
here.
human.
Yeah.
I just had a question. Do you need to publish in chronological order? I mean, if
No,
you're gonna do
not
like
at
that,
all.
Not at all,
like
no.
You could go from,
I'd say skip around and tell
Yeah.
the best story you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's story, because sometimes you do things and it happens and you think, why did I do that? So a perfect opportunity for a flashback. When I was 5, this happened. So that may be, it's storytelling 101. And whatever you're good at, tell it in your voice in a way that works for you, because you're telling it.
I'd go as far also, what I found is sometimes you don't even remember something that happened until you're writing it now, and you're like, why did I behave that way? And then you remember what your parents said at that point, and then you're like, oh, all right, now I understand. So yeah, use that.
Right here.
I have 2 questions. What is the best size for a memoir? I've heard 5 by 8 and 6 by 9.
I do mine 5.5 by 8.5. I don't know if that's the best, though. That's just what I
all my
do.
books are 5/8, except one where I went with that. But no, I don't think that matters. I think,
I don't
and
think it
length
matters.
also. Pilgrimage is 45,000 words with a lot of
Well,
pictures
that was my
in.
next question.
Yeah, no, it will be the size that it is, but I would definitely say make sure you edit it down. I think that editing is a shorter memoir that's well edited is going to do far better than a much longer memoir that's full of repetition. I mean,
I do 6 by 9 just to make the pictures bigger. I mean, we shot real high res pictures, so trying to get the most out of them. And 9,000 to 12,000 words, because they're mostly pictures.
Okay, thank you.
Right here.
I wanted to ask you guys, how do you, that idea of picking a thread and focusing on it? I mean, we all have kind of multiple lives that we go through, multiple transformations. So when choosing to do a memoir, how do you pick the one thread? How did you settle on the one thing that you thought now was the time? How did you know that it was a time to write about this and not something
Well,
else?
for me, it was what's interesting. What's the best story? I hadn't seen the girl I fell in love with in high school for 30 years. And I ran into her completely out of the blue, knew who she was immediately. And I said, oh my gosh, Dawn, it's Shawn. And she said, Shawn who?
It's good that she carried the candle all that
Shaboom!
time.
Yeah, thanks for carrying the torch for me all these years, honey. And so that's an inciting incident. That's a story. So I try to look at it as my life turned out to be a romance book. I had the meet cute, I had the bad time, I had the all is lost, and then I had the happily ever after. So that was an easy choice for me to make. So I would say, to answer your question, pick whichever thread of your life you can fit into the traditional beats or tropes of a story.
And I've talked about being an intuitive writer, and I just had that sense that this was the story, but only after I had finished my arc. So that would be the other thing. Sometimes you're in the middle of the arc. So if you sit down, you're like, okay, where is my transformation? If you don't have a transformation, you haven't finished it yet. And it may be that arc won't finish for another year or a decade, or it may never finish. So I think only you can tell.
And how do you get over this whole thing again, this idea of like being vulnerable and being authentic? How do you get through this, the fear of judgment from people who know you, especially if you publish under your own name and you're, like for example, Joanna, with your book about darkness, and you're sharing, I mean, I haven't read it yet, but I'm assuming, how do you get past that fear of like, crap, like people in my, with fiction, you can kind of like hide it behind all the stuff, but there it's just you.
No, my dad just read it, but he read the gold hardback, so I'd already published it, and I needed to do it that way. But yeah, I was terrified. I knew when he got it, and I was expecting a text, and it didn't come, and it didn't come, and it didn't come, and I was like,
And he changed
shit.
his number, and then he moved.
But eventually he replied. But no, I just think you don't get over it, and if you don't care, you have not written a very good memoir, unless it's more of a jokey, happy one like he's writing.
And my answer to that is kind of when people ask me, how do you deal with imposter syndrome? And I say, the only way out is through, and that's it. That, as hard as that is, you've got to find it within yourself, that resolve. So who else we got here? There we go, right there.
When I write memoir, I often find myself shouting, or editing my memoirs, I find myself shouting at the readers, you want plot beats? This is how it really happened. The most exciting thing in the story happened at the 30% mark, not at the 80% mark. How am I, what rules of the plot beats of the universal story are you allowed to bend when you're writing memoir?
Well, I pay no attention at all to that. So
neither do I.
I'm a completely organic writer. I start with no outline and a blank page and just let the story tell itself. So I'm not a good structure question answerer.
And neither am I, because I'm also an intuitive discovery writer.
I would say if the highlight of your story is at the 30% mark, the 50% of your story would be the end. I'm a big fan of a story in Elmore Leonard who said, don't put in the stuff that the readers don't read. So if it's a lot of setup or a lot of boring. So like Shawn said, 140,000 words down to 72,000 because he took out the stuff that, hey, it's neat, it means something to me, but to the readers doesn't mean a damn thing. And you bore the snot out of them. And for me, I'm looking at the upsell of hey, if you like this, you should really read my Battleship Leviathan series because Marines do these things. So I like to entertain. I like to storytell, and I saw that once I started writing. So looking back at my memoirs, I think I have like 50 or 60,000 words already, and it's all about fun. The fun you can have, especially in the Marine Corps, it's in the extreme highest stress situations. People are living or dying, and we're joking because it's what you do. If you've been in a life or death situations, you probably made really inappropriate jokes, and they were funny at the time. But that's how we deal with the extreme stress. So I have that stuff in there. I have the jokes. I have the stuff that happened, and I think it resonates. But it's also it's a story. It's fun. We got from here to there. I started off enlisted. I retired as an officer. Okay, good. And the neat things that happened in between, without dragging people down. A lot of books like the dark genres, I don't get them because I don't want to read a story that sucks the life out of me. I don't read horror. I don't watch horror on TV. So for me, that doesn't work. So I want that story. I want the hero's journey. And if I can't live the hero's journey, then we're going to make it a comedy, and we're going to have fun.
Got time for maybe just one more question, maybe two, depending on how long-winded we get.
Just a quick question. So in the
Oh, thank
time
you.
you're writing all your fiction books, do you just write the memoir in one go, or are you interspersing bits of the writing as you're writing all your fiction books as well?
Hi, Mel.
Hi,
Great to see you.
Well, as I say, I mean, I've been writing. I thought I was writing a series of travel books, like guidebooks. So, like 20 years of bits of writing wrangled into memoir, and then this writing the shadow book. So, lots and lots of things. But it's interesting what just Craig said there about where does your, the darkness stuff. So my writing the shadow book is answering the question that my mum had, which is why are you so dark? Did I do something wrong? And she asked me that decades ago, and I could only write this book after writing Pilgrimage because of what you said about facing people's judgment. It's like the first memoir enabled me to start bringing all that other stuff out. But I mined my journals since the mid-90s.
Right.
So I journal, I'm sure a lot of you do, and so I mine a lot of that for that. And I do write dark
That's great.
things.
That
But
is great.
But it's powerful stuff. But I just think, because it's not something you just sit down and write, unless it is a sort of A to B journey thing or whatever, which is fine, but the kind of the deeper, longer arcs of your life might take longer, and you have to allow it to take as long as it takes, I think.
I've been working on my memoirs for 15 years. And this is me. I publish a book a month.
Yeah.
and still, this isn't ready.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's still a work in progress.
I write a 100,000-word book every 7 weeks, and it took me 5.5 years to write my memoir. And it comes back mostly to what Joanne said, which is I didn't know the ending yet. I had to live the ending before I could write the ending. So
Yeah.
I think we got time for one more question, if there is any. We got a minute and a half here. Anybody?
2:28. Got a minute.
There we are. Come on.
I was just curious, since you do focus so much on other genres, and Joe, in your podcast, I noticed that you are talking about your travels, and you obviously used to have a travel podcast, but also you ask people to send in photos of where they're listening from. And Craig, the one thing I know about you, even though I'm not your ideal reader, is that you are a Marine. And so whenever you come out with that, I'll read the book. And I'm just wondering if that little bit of seeding, for your future memoirs was, intentional, or just something you do, or
It's for all marketing and for making community. Many of you know us much better than we know you. And your readers feel the same way about you. So I think it's just something you do. At the beginning, it's not naturally. You have to force it, but over time, it becomes more natural, I think, to share more openly.
I'm the only Alaskan most people know. So
Yeah.
that makes it
But
simple.
you've shared honestly about your health,
You bet.
and
Yeah.
and everyone cares
Yeah.
more.
And I
Not
appreciate
more,
that.
but the same.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's a vulnerable thing. So I think
Okay, I think that's it. Thank you guys for the
Thank
questions.
you.
Thank you.
Italian.